Thanks for tuning back into the Minuteman Initiative. And today we're going to be getting into what it means to be kind of a modern day Minuteman and kind of the core things that we believe are part of your personal responsibility, something that we view as reinforcing responsibility, kind of the structure we base our support and our educational information on, as well as what we think for the individual should be focused on and reinforced on an individual level. So sit back and enjoy the conversation between me and Steven today. And let's get into it.
All right, man. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
That's good. That's real good.
I guess if I wasn't, then
We wouldn't be here.
no, we probably still would be.
We'd just be doing other things.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yep. It's just me and Jacob again. We're here.
The way it should be. No.
It's the way that it is right now.
It's the way that it is.
Yeah. There's nothing we can do about it because no one wants to get on the show with us. No, not really. We haven't actually asked anyone yet.
Yeah, we haven't asked anyone.
But yeah, we're just going to keep it simple, dude.
Apparently the guest is going to be my throat today.
Yeah, that was crazy. Whatever you just ate just wanted to come back up and say hello. Are you all right?
Yeah.
That's good.
That's good. Oh, man.
So, today,
We're off to a great start, everybody.
we got to get the energy flowing, you know.
Dude, the energy's flowing. I feel it. I'm ready to go. This is a good topic today. So we've got, basically we're going to be breaking down kind of the core essentials or like the things that we think are really important. You know, last episode, which again, if you're coming back from our long hiatus as DDS Unscripted, we've kind of rebranded the name to the Minuteman Initiative. Super intense. No, but a little rebranding kind of signifies not only just like our shift of focus, but it's more than that. It's actually the final, I almost said the final form.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the final countdown. I was like, what?
The final countdown. No, the final form would have been so crazy too. This is our final form. No, we're not even close to that yet. We got a lot more evolution to do, but no. So this is a vision that Steven and I have been working towards since we both took over the company as 50-50 partners. You know, like we talked about last episode. There was a 3-part ownership, and you know, if you want to hear more about that, we talked about that in the last episode a little bit. And we want to do, like I said, we want to do a kind of a business origin stories, I guess, at some point, but we'll see. But when honestly, it was probably even before then. It's stuff we've talked about since.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's probably been in our thought process since the very beginning.
Like back in 2016.
Even before we started the company. I mean, we had to have this drive in order to even start the company to begin with. So, yeah, I would say that we've always kind of had this in the back of our heads. Like I said, it was kind of behind more closed doors before, where now it's becoming more open.
Yep. Yeah. And yeah, that's exactly right. Like, so back in 2016 is when we started the company. And, you know, even before that, this whole focus on individual responsibility and taking full ownership of your protection and your defense of others in the community, working with like-minded individuals, you know, blending between different backgrounds and experiences, but being focused on the ready civilian, you know, the citizen, the everyday person who lives here is what we believe is your responsibility to be willing and able to stand up and defend your community, defend your freedom, defend your country, defend yourself, and yeah, I mean, thankfully here in this country, we have the Second Amendment, which is it's written down on some of the most important documents for the founding of our country, and kind of the setup of our government that give you, or that protect the God-given rights that you have as humans, and we have that also as a, recognized by our government,
Yeah.
I think it goes beyond government. The government doesn't give you the right. The government,
anyone that actually knows history, our founding fathers, when they were kind of creating America, they were religious people. So the God-given rights is how kind of we as a country got our rights within the country. It all goes back to
these inalienable rights.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And, and that's why I always like to say, it's not just for Americans. This is no matter what, no matter where you live, like your government may not protect it. Your government may not be for it, but you have inalienable rights to defend yourself and defend your communities. And it comes down to your responsibility. And we'll get more into that in a little bit, but that was like the big concept. And, we've had a lot of ideas of what we wanted to do since the very beginning. And earlier when I said, and we even said it kind of last episode, I've been using words like shifting focus. I guess it's not even been shifting focus. It's been more like, we've gotten to the point where we're enabled to finally start to kind of hone in on the things we've been trying to do all this time, because it takes time. Like when we first started the business, I mean, you've got to, if you focus on too much at once, nothing will get done. You won't go anywhere,
Yeah.
So you have to kind of like, and Steven and I are sometimes to our own detriment. We're very like, kind of calculated, and we like to kind of chip things off as we go, and
we're task oriented.
Yeah, we take a long time to make decisions. Like sometimes we'll look at something, we're like, should we buy that? Well, not always, but sometimes we're like, buy it, and it just happens. But I'd say if it's a big decision, we're like, well, let's think about this and let's try this, and we kind of take some time to.
I think as time's gone on, like even from like the mindset to like how we conduct ourselves as a business, we've become more quick to just pull the trigger, because we realize like that's part of business, is you got to take a risk.
Yeah.
And before we were too calculated to the point where we were always just taking small bites. We were never taking big bites and taking a chance at, okay, well, that was too much to take on at the time. So I think it's the same with some of the material we've recently came out with. It's like, let's just do it,
Yeah.
Where before we would be like, okay, let's kind of hold back there, because it could just fall flat on its face, and we were too new as a company to afford that, I guess.
Yeah. Right. And then, and I know this happens for me personally. Like I get caught in that analysis paralysis where I'm like thinking about stuff a bunch. I'm like, what about this? And then I got this idea, and like, but that idea leads to this. And then hold on, before we do that, I got to do this first, and we need to build this up before we can do that. And then you just don't end up doing anything. So I get caught there, and that's where Steven and I balance each other out pretty good, because Steven's usually just like, why are you even thinking about that? Like, this is what we're talking about. And I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so, you get a little too far ahead.
Start going down the idea rabbit hole. But
ultimately, I would say when we decided to, back in 2018, the beginning of 2018, when Cody stepped away, I would say it kind of almost allowed us to do what we've always wanted to do, I guess.
Yeah.
Not really that Cody was Cody kind of was holding us back, but we didn't really know it until he had stepped away, I think.
Yeah.
Like, nothing against Cody, obviously, but we were very focused on holsters and holsters only at that time.
Well, he even said that. He even said, I feel like that was something he had said.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm holding back your potential. I kind of wanted it to be this, and you guys obviously have expressed all this ambition and interest in going into these broader directions.
Yeah.
Not just being, making products, but getting into education. And because for me, I mean, that like that's why I got involved with the company. Like,
Yeah, that was the main drive. Like,
yeah.
So that would have been back in like 2015, when we.
Yep.
Well, you and Andrew Register,
Mm-hmm.
Obviously we're trying to start
Reggie Reg.
Yeah, which we might have him on the podcast at some point, maybe sooner than later, actually. But
the
we'll
redhead
see.
Baron, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. So just bringing in pizza. So isn't that a pizza company?
Yeah. Red Baron Pizza.
Yeah. Anyways, but I mean, obviously that's a pilot as well.
I was gonna say, just that's a pizza company.
Yeah.
No.
But anyways, yeah. So long story short, obviously, back in 2018, we had that shift. We kind of started the podcast that same year too, I think.
Yeah, we did. Because that's another thing we had been talking about forever, and Cody was actually like wanting that to happen too, but
yeah,
it just never really happened.
But we didn't really know the direction we wanted to go with the podcast until obviously recently, where we were like, you know what, we have so much. I think we didn't realize how much potential we had with the podcast when we first started it. I think we just thought like, oh yeah, no one's gonna listen. It's just gonna be like
a few
we're doing
like
it super
for fun.
Fans out there.
We're like, screw it, let's just do it.
So, so yeah, we started it. We realized, oh man, this actually has a little bit of momentum going for it. And then obviously Caden stepped away. So it kind of put us in this weird bind, but now we're kind of, I think, taking it to its full potential with this podcast now. So
yeah,
I'm really excited about what's to come.
Yeah. And I think the shift of, or I guess the refocusing of like what we've been trying to do as a company this whole time is finally happening. And a lot of it has to do with like the company. It's been enabled. Like it's something that we've been working hard towards, and that something is that, that big idea, like just, I feel like we're rambling a little bit, but not to cause confusion, but the whole idea of like education and support and trying to build up, trying to provide more info, becoming another avenue, because there's a lot of companies doing this, or doing things like it, but becoming another avenue for people to look to and cherry pick out of like, what do I need to do as an individual? How do I personally, get involved in, coordinating with teams or setting up my home for, more sustainment and defense kind of situations? How do I better myself and my family for overall just
preparedness
and defense and protection, and and this it's a rabbit hole, and that's why these long form podcasts are great. But and we've kind of broken down different core kind of ideas that we think are kind of wrap up everything that we view as really important to focus on as an individual. So we're going to take this episode to talk about that, but we just kind of wanted to, these are going to be things that, individual episodes are going to get more specific, just kind of like what we did with the old version of our podcast, and some of those things will probably fall into these different categories individually.
Yeah.
So we wanted to have like a foundational kind of podcast. It's like, these are the things that we're going to, different aspects out of each of these core items are what we're going to be focusing on. And we kind of brought them up, I think, last episode, but yeah. So really quick, just to get into that, basically, let's see here. It's 8 different things. And they're labeled as follows. Sorry, I'm kind of reading something here. Okay, so you've got coordinate, so coordination, fight, or the willingness to fight, protect, so being a protector, communicate, respond, so aid, just general response to emergencies, navigate, knowing where you are, knowing where you're going, survival, and then faith/freedom are kind of tied together. So these are kind of the 8 core things that we think if you focus on these as an individual, you're going to be setting yourself up for success. So Um, and again, we've come up with these things over a long period of time. But this general idea has been, I mean, since the conception of the company, this has been kind of where we've been headed. And, like we were saying, it was just starting out, we weren't able to, it's like if we were able to focus on it, we wouldn't have been able to provide the kind of quality we would have wanted to really get behind it. And it's kind of been a big, when Steven and I took control, well, that sounds weird, but when it was just me and you in the company, we came up with the motto, reinforcing responsibility. And that's kind of, we never had a company motto before that. But we sat down and really thought about like, what are we doing as a company? Like, what's our goal? What do we actually want to do? And we decided that it's to reinforce responsibility. Like, we have such a heavy respect and focus on individual responsibility. It's not about relying on a government, or it's not about relying on, being overly reliant on a bunch of people in your life. It's about you personally taking the responsibility for your own actions and owning up to those responsibilities, owning up to those actions, and taking matters into your own hands in a way, within reason. Obviously, there's there's good and bad, and you want to be within that, and that's something that kind of falls into the faith aspect, which we'll get into later. But that was like the big drive, and so we were like, well, what what are companies actually doing? Like, we never did this to make a bunch of money. Like, at least in my head, it was never about making a bunch of money and stuff. I mean, you have to make money to be able to push on and do the things you need to do, but it's been more about that support. It's been more about exactly that, reinforcing others' responsibility. And then I think that phrase goes on to individuals as well. Like, you have to constantly, as you work on yourself and as you work on these different items and these different kind of core things and, other things that are important in your life, you are constantly reinforcing your own responsibility, know? And so I think that's kind of even more so what that means. So I think it's it encompasses what we've been trying to do for so long really well. And, that's kind of that kind of like unleashed it a little bit, was directing that way. And now we've actually, really dialed in on like what we think that is. So.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, pretty much exactly how it went down. But, so should we just get right into what we like coordinate?
Yeah.
Like kind of the main, just kind of the hot topics. We'll just kind of dive into some of the hot topics on each thing. So coordinate, meaning kind of building your community around you. Kind of going back to the individual responsibility aspect. If everyone is responsible for themselves individually, then it's going to make it easier to coordinate within your community if you have more like-minded people in that. So,
yeah. And this may be, one of the most important aspects. I mean, all of them are very important, but excuse me. But coordinating with like-minded individuals is, you got to do it. I mean, there are, ways and strategies for people to kind of survive on their own in, certain situations. And sometimes maybe it's better, but I think to really encompass the rest of these things we're going to talk about, and to be, an asset for your community, you have to coordinate with other people.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that the gun community as a whole, it's been so focused on like concealed carry, and again, this does not mean that's bad. Everyone should carry, I believe. Everyone should learn how to be responsible and, proficient with a firearm and have the right mentality and carry and stuff like that. But, the industry as a whole has been so hyper focused on that specific part of it. And it goes so far beyond that. At times that's, that is the kind of the peak of whatever you're doing from any given moment, because things fluctuate, things change, life's different as life goes on. But, it's been so focused on, like, I don't want to say selfishness, because that's not the right way to say it, but it's been so individualized, I guess, that it doesn't include, the actual community, I feel like.
Yeah.
So learning how to coordinate with others, going beyond, and it could start small. It could start like, hey, let's start training together. Let's start running, bill drills out of inside the waistband. Let's start like testing each other. Let's work, and that's kind of how, it started for us years
that's
ago.
how it starts for most people. Like when they're putting together a group of guys that, you train with, it kind of just starts with, hey, if you guys have similar passions or whatever, you guys are both into the gun stuff, just go out and start shooting. And eventually either it won't work out with that person because you end up not getting along, and you guys just don't work well. You don't mesh well.
Yeah.
Mesh well together. So it's kind of like you find it out pretty quick. But, the guys that we've kind of, brought into the group and are all like brothers to us now. So we know them real well, and I enjoy them. I can hang out with just one of them of all the group of the entire group that we have. I can just go hang out with one of them, and I'm gonna have just as much fun as if I'm with everyone. So for sure, we've been very fortunate in that respect, that we have an awesome group of guys that we train with. So, and so far, even when we've kind of started training with other groups, throughout the community, everyone's been really cool. Like I haven't had issues with anyone so far. Like I think when you have similar interests and stuff like that, it's pretty easy to get along with someone. At least for me, I don't know.
Yeah. No, and I think that's it. I mean, I think it's those understanding of those like core values, I guess, in a way, is like, if those are pretty well aligned, then I think you're going to naturally get along with people. I mean, some personalities don't, just in general, don't get along well with others, but no, I agree. But yeah, I mean, the coordinating on a level too of actually creating, plans and procedures, SOPs for those, for the military crowds, but which is standard operating procedure. But creating SOPs, creating procedures on like, hey, if this stuff were to happen, this is how we're going to respond. Coordinating on a communication level, building up your logistics, and literally getting to that level, like literally trying to figure out how to maximize your logistical effort as a group, I think that is so overlooked, and it's so vital. I mean, just as a kind of this is a very big picture example, but you look over at and this is a little more towards logistics, but you look at Russia right now in Ukraine, and they're having all these issues, like they're running out of fuel on their way to a neighboring country, and they're in these big long convoys that are just getting shut down by like one vehicle being blown up, and like, dozens and dozens and dozens of vehicles just stopped like out on a road, they're having problems resupplying their air support, different things like that. So they're having to rely a lot on like shelling and bombs and missiles and stuff like that. But as far as their ground forces go, they've had such a hard time, from what we can see. I mean, granted, this is coming from, we've been following it on a lot of different sources. So, but there's always propaganda on both sides. But from what we can tell, it seems like they're having a logistical nightmare over there.
And they are, because those old Cold War tanks they're if you look at how much miles to the gallon they get, it's ridiculously, like, they burn through fuel so badly. Like it's terrible. Like I'm good friends with a guy who's was born and raised in Ukraine, and I was talking to him the other day about the tanks and stuff, and I was like, man, I just don't understand why they're like, for one, they're running out of fuel so much, and for two, like they're kind of getting smoked by like ambushes and stuff. And this is kind of a rabbit trail, but he was talking about how over there in Ukraine, the mud on the sides of the roads is so like it'll just sink. The tanks sink in, so they're relying on the roads to actually travel. Because if they go in the mud, then that's just more time that they're sitting there trying to get it unstuck, and they're burning through more fuel. So they can't go off the road because they'll get stuck, I guess. And he was saying that that's why they're getting hit with ambushes so hard, is because they have to stay on the road, otherwise they're going to sink.
Sick, dude. A little Mother Nature defense mechanism over there.
Yeah. He said that during farming season, he said that was always a problem too. Like, he said, your John Deere tractors and stuff like that will just sink out in the fields and stuff, like, and you just are stuck. So.
Interesting. Yeah, so obviously you've got all this stuff going on, and so they're lacking coordination. There's a big lack in coordination. I think, a lot of that goes to the fighting ideology of Russia. They're very wave based, and that's a conversation for a different time. But in contrast, as much as I want to talk crap on the U.S. Army, because I was a slave to that institution for a while, but they're super good at, the U.S. military in general is extremely, honestly, we have the best logistical and coordinated efforts in the world. Like,
which is why we've been so dominant for so long.
Yeah. I mean, it is.
We don't do anything very haphazardly. we everything we do is well thought out, and it's like a game of chess, I think. So it's not, Putin is a very, like, he runs Russia off of, like, mental, like, making everyone think within Russia that they're the best.
Propaganda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He uses propaganda to get his people behind him. Where America honestly doesn't, like, sadly say, America doesn't do any propaganda to get people behind the military, like, really, like, in all reality. Like, for the most part, people either love the military or hate it.
Yeah.
I feel like in America, there's no in between, really. And then you got your, I mean, I don't know for sure, but most Russians probably are, like, in love with their military because they're kind of brainwashed. Putin is almost using, like, a Hitler type strategy with his people.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very, like, superior,
Yeah, we are the
leader. Yeah. No, it's, I mean, I guess in contrast, the point I was trying to make is, like, we had a full on, not invasion, but, like, we literally sat in another country for 20 plus years over in Afghanistan and fully set up there. Occupied. That's the word I was looking for. We occupied Afghanistan for 20 plus years.
Oh, and we could have been there much longer if we wanted.
Oh, yeah. We could have been there indefinitely if we wanted to be.
Yeah.
So we occupied that country with no, like, struggle, really, of resupply, anything like that. I mean, sure, there was probably little individual things that you never hear about, but as far as, like, the actual invasion of Afghanistan, like, no. And granted, it's much different. It's not a country that has, a bunch of weaponry that is pretty good at stopping, invading forces, but it's just different levels of coordination. The coordination from Russia was not really there. It's more just like the thought. They operate more on the thought of, oh, we'll crush them. We don't really need to worry about it. We'll just, when the time comes, we're just going to be ready to go in and just do it.
Yeah.
Versus how we did it was like, okay, we need to plan this out. We need to try to strategize. We need to sit down and come up with multiple strategies to see which one's going to work best. And then when this one doesn't work, we need to have alternate plans and strategies That's what you need to have that mindset. You need to have the mindset of coordinating with others, coming up with strategy, coming up with alternate ideas and alternate strategies in case your initial ones don't work. Vetting and testing each other, working with and through each other, deciding, who can you trust? Trust is a huge thing in coordination,
Yeah.
Who's trustworthy? Who don't you think is? Who do you need to keep a healthy distance from? Who do you need to not be connected with altogether? There's all these things like that that come into play, and you have to really, it can't just be something that you feel like is just going to fall into place when that time comes, whatever it is, whether it's, supply chains being disrupted, and you start dealing with like looting and panic and, for lack of a better phrase, like rape and pillage kind of stuff. Or if it's an occupying force that comes in and invades, and, like there's been that Russian, just because we're in Alaska, you had that Russian guy which it's funny because I've been seeing like a lot of people share this around like it's a legitimate thing. This is just some like dumb Russian lawmaker guy, as far as I can, from the research I've done. Like he's some like Russian either lawmaker or lawyer or something that basically said that, America was on lease to Russia, and Alaska was on lease to America from Russia, and that Russia wanted Alaska back, and then a fort in California. And of course, like, no, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But, if it randomly did, if Russia was like, all right, well, we're coming back and taking Alaska,
Dude, they'd get smoked.
So,
I mean, I hate to be that confident, but I'm just saying, like, if you think about it, so Alaska, if Russia were to invade, this is another rabbit trail that I'm just going to hit really quick because I was thinking about the other day, and I was talking about it with one of my buddies, but if Russia were to try to attack Alaska, they would have to attack in a spot that there's a road system. Otherwise, like, they're not going to go to Nome.
Yeah.
They're not just going to go straight across to Nome and just have no road system. Like, cool, you guys just got into a random village, and what are you doing there now?
Yeah, try to drive through all that tundra.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to go to the Kenai Peninsula. Like, that's where they have to go.
Yeah.
And they're going to come to the Kenai Peninsula, and they're going to have to try to not only board their boats in, it's like you got to come into a big enough harbor that you can get your huge boats carrying whatever it's carrying, tanks, people.
Mm-hmm.
And by that time, we're going to already know.
Yeah.
So you're going to have, Fairbanks and Anchorage already ready to come down on the Kenai Peninsula. You're going to have all your civilians that are pretty well armed. And then you're going to have probably other help from the United States come up.
Oh, I mean, the United States, I mean, yeah, they would be helping way before, like...
Well, I know. Like, are their boats even going to get here? That's
you're
the
talking
thing.
nuclear-powered submarines and...
Yeah, so...
air assets, like, yeah, there's literally no way for them to get here. Like, that's exactly it. Like, a lot of people have been saying, well, they could just literally drive across the Bering Strait. And it's like, well, first of all, have you ever seen what the frozen Bering Strait looks like? You can't just drive across that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, but it's very difficult. And
then they're just going to be a Nome.
And then, like,
we're back to the same problem. Like,
and you really think we're just going to allow them to cross the Bering Strait?
No.
Like, no, as soon as they're across the date line, it's time to start
blowing
up the
what I'm
Bering
getting at
Strait.
is, like, a lot of people don't know how Alaska works, but we don't have, like, multiple highways. We have one road.
Yeah.
That goes up to Anchorage.
Yeah, there's no interstates up here.
So it's going to be ambush central. Like, you're going to go through roads where you have nothing but mountains on either side, and you can't go anywhere. There's no like, react to contact or anything like that. Like, if you get ambushed from the mountains, you're not able to do anything.
You're not maneuvering.
Don't do it, Anakin. I got the high ground.
Yeah, exactly. You underestimate my power. That's exactly what Putin acts like.
Yeah. So, anyways, coordination.
Yeah.
It's a very important thing, and if they did attempt to do that, that would obviously be a a mission lacking coordination.
Yeah.
Because they would all die.
Yeah. Well, and just going back to what I was trying to say, like, obviously, if that were to happen, that would be something that's something you should coordinate for. It sounds outlandish to plan on stuff like that, but planning for another nod to the military. The military's great at coming up with scenarios that are ridiculous. Like, I remember going through training events and being like, this would never happen. Like, are you serious? Like, everybody, all 13 of you lay down, you're dead. And you're like, what is going on? Like, yep. This makes no sense, or whatever it was. Or, man. Yeah, so they would come up with these scenarios, but the whole purpose of it was because if you can rise above that stuff, then it creates, I don't want to say it makes it easier, but it helps you get through real situations because you've done something similar to that, but like to the extreme, Yeah. And the real stuff's always much different. There's most definitely
you got to amplify the intensity in training so that way the amplification of just
it just comes
real
close.
Life.
Yeah, it almost comes close. So, but that's the same thing with coordination. When you're planning and coordinating with others, come up with some kind of outlandish, like if you want to pretend that if you want to have a plan for zombies, like sure, like it gets you better at coordinating. It gets you better at coming up with plans and ideas and, hey, what, like sit down with a group of others and be like, hey, let's sit down and come up with what our plan would be if zombies took over. It sounds dumb, but hey, if if zombies really did take over, you'd be one step ahead of everybody else, So,
yeah, but who actually knows what zombies are gonna do?
They
like
don't,
if zombies actually do end up existing, like you don't know how to prepare for that fight. I feel like I'd just prepare for a more realistic fight.
Well, yeah, you would, but I'm just saying, like, that's the point I'm making is that you need to coordinate on a broad level. Like, you don't know what it's going to be because that you can go down the what if rabbit hole for all of eternity. Yeah. Well, what if it's the Russians? What if it's the Koreans? What if it's America? What if it's the random? I don't know. Like you can.
Yeah,
what if it's aliens?
Going
you
back
can
to
go
that,
down.
It's
aliens.
Going back to that, what I was talking about last podcast was, your training cycle is going to be more intense if you don't know who you're going to be fighting against because you're kind of preparing for a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
So that's how it should be. You should be coordinating for a bunch of different stuff. Like you should think about, okay, what happens if Russia did somehow get to the Kenai Peninsula? Because that's actually where they're hitting. They're going to hit where we live.
Yeah.
More than likely. Like, I mean, yeah, they could go to Juneau, potentially. I don't know why they would. That doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, because, I mean...
They're going to try to get out of the water as fast as possible.
There's no road system out of Juneau, though. You have to fly in and out of there, right?
No, Juneau will connect to Canada.
Oh, right.
I think it connects directly into Canada if you want to go right into Canada, but I don't know. You go into Canada and then up and around.
Oh, that in and of itself would be a logistical nightmare. If they're running out of fuel going straight over into Ukraine, they'd definitely run out of fuel doing that. So,
yeah. So anyways, you got to prepare for a bunch of different stuff. You got to coordinate with not only your group of guys that you may be training with or may not be training with. Maybe you need to learn how to coordinate with different like-minded individuals, which, like we said, I mean, just get with a group, have coffee in the morning or whatever you want to do,
Yeah.
Have something and just slowly, even if they're not into guns right away, you do hobbies with them, with a buddy or whatever, and you can slowly kind of try to get people, hey, you ever shot guns before? You ever want to go shooting and bring them to the range? And, usually that's all it takes,
Mm-hmm.
is just bringing someone to the range with you. And it's like,
yeah, I would say the bond is more important than like the interest in firearms.
Yeah.
Because this stuff is not, passion or interest in firearms is not a prerequisite for this stuff.
No, because there's so many things behind it more than just, being able to shoot guns and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think it's an important part.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of equaling the playing fields by having firearms and, That's why our government can't just do what other countries' governments do and just do whatever they want to their people, is because we are so. I mean, we're up armored. Like we have firearms, we have a bunch of stuff, and our government knows that.
Yeah.
So it keeps your government in check by having the Second Amendment in place.
Yeah, and that's something that you see too. Like it's good to still see it in the American people. And yeah, people may not always agree with what the reasons are, but with these protests that you see, and a lot of them get way out of hand, but that's a backlash. That's a natural backlash to something that the government, the authority figures are doing that the people don't agree with and don't like. And that's like the first step. And then after that comes like the more violent reactions. And so there's a constant like checks and balances, and that's a massive part of how our country is founded. Our country was founded in a way that no governing authority can have all power over the people.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's starting to be chipped away at more and more and more. And I think it's by design, of course. But, so again, you got to coordinate and always be thinking outside the box. And you, like Steven was saying, you got to think broadly and prepare for a lot of different things, but kind of like what I said with the what if rabbit hole, like,
yeah, you don't want to
go down that
just
forever.
Like bound up on that.
Yeah. But, yeah, so the next thing that we have on there, really quick, I wanted to say, like, so what let's break down really quick, like, how do you start coordinating with people? So we talked about, obviously, making bonds, so finding like-minded individuals. Then what? So meeting regularly.
Yeah, meeting regularly, having, obviously trying to put trainings together with those people. Mm-hmm. There's going to be groups outside of your group also that are going to be training as well, probably doing kind of the same.
Well, maybe, and that's on you to figure out. Go out and figure out if other people are doing kind of what you're trying to do.
Yeah. So once you find that out, obviously doing joint trainings with different groups could be, beneficial. I was going to say something else that was pretty good. Oh, another thing with coordinating is finding, strengths and weaknesses within your group. Like you said, loving guns and being all gun is not necessarily a prerequisite for being in this. If someone's really good at, gardening, or a really good mechanic, or, there's a bunch of different traits that are really helpful to have within your group, so
yeah.
Pretty much everyone can bring something to the team.
Yeah.
And then figuring out who's passionate in different areas and who's better at what, and kind of, placing people in positions so that they thrive in, I guess.
Yeah. And don't bottleneck those skills and those things. Like don't be like, well, we're focusing on this and this and this. It's like, if you're trying to work with a group, or you come in and you're starting to coordinate, like offer up what you're good at. Like be like, hey, I'm really good at this. Like I'm good at like software programming or whatever. And it's like sick, like there's going to be a use for that at some point, at some level in the coordination. So
yeah,
utilize it, put it to work. And so strengths and weaknesses. Also, I think it's important to develop kind of a rank structure, not like all like, I should say a leadership structure. So you want to have, some kind of leadership, and, it doesn't need to be like draconian or like tyrannical or anything like that, but, something that everybody agrees on, like have someone or a group of people that are kind of helping lead and make decisions. Because that helps with the overall like effectiveness and coordination and stuff, is having some kind of
it helps with the
leadership.
Logistics, I would say, mostly.
Yeah.
It's like, if you don't have that and you don't have someone who's passionate about doing that, and that's another thing that's, individual skills, not just, what you can do with your hands, but what you can do with your mind. So,
yeah,
another thing to think about.
With your mind. Think about
in the garden of your mind.
Yeah. I think those are great things. And, obviously it continues on from there. And the more, coming up with ways to like recruit / add people in a way that's not going to compromise like, you know, any kind of operational security you may have. So yeah, like vetting people, testing, vetting, stuff like that. Dude, there's just dogs. I don't know if it's getting picked up on the microphone or not. If it is, just a heads up for people. Right next door to us is a dog groomer. So right next door to our shop, there's and the dogs. Some dogs hate getting groomed, so there's that.
Dude,
what?
And that dog hates it.
Yeah, I can hear it in my headset, so I feel like it might be on here, but I don't know, maybe not.
Our mics are pretty good about cutting it out, but
yeah,
just a fair warning: if you hear dogs,
if you hear weird like yelping in the background, it's
yeah.
I'm curious now, but anyways, moving on. So getting into the next core thing, which is kind of a fun one, I guess. Well, it's fun sounding, which is fight or being a fighter. So this is pretty self-explanatory, but you know, ultimately you don't want to have to fight if you can help it, but you have to be willing to fight. I think anything, you know, the freedom, first of all, the freedom we have is absolutely worth fighting for. I mean, it's been something that we fought for. Again, to use Ukraine as an example, they've had a taste of freedom from the Soviet Union, and they've been fighting for it. They do not want to lose their freedom. And, you know, they're even super corrupt over there, and they have all these issues, but it's still, compared to what they had, it's still freedom.
And what's happening, you know, with how many, you know, innocent people are getting killed over there by the bombings that Russians doing is putting fuel to that fire, I think, over there. You know, it's making people angry. So not only is there freedom, but there's probably a lot of passion from the people, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
So if I was there, I would, oh man. Yeah, it makes my blood boil thinking about it, because it's just like,
yeah, if you put yourself in their shoes and you think about your family and children and friends and stuff, and it's like, yeah, it just makes you rage.
Yeah, like I just saw this video of this, I don't know, he looked like he was probably a little 1-year-old or something that got pulled out of the rubble after a bombing, and it's baby's just completely limp, you know, and they start doing CPR on him or her. And then, man, I just fire.
Yeah.
Flames and fire, dude. Dude, I just
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely evil. So
it is.
Regardless what you think about what's going on over there, Russia is definitely needs to be. Yeah, I mean that's a different topic, but yeah, they need to be shut down.
Yeah, and you know, I mean the Ukrainians are fighting with everything they have to try to maintain, you know, that freedom. I mean that's how important it is. So obviously freedom. You know, more generally, I think the fight between good and evil. It's like, I think it's Winston Churchill that made the quote of the only thing necessary for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. Something like that. I think I screwed it up, but I believe
the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men should do nothing.
Yeah.
John F. Kennedy.
Oh, John F. Kennedy. Okay. I thought it was Winston Churchill. So I sounded like could have been a Winston Churchill thing. Anyways, yeah, so super famous quote, and I love that quote because it's so true. You know, standing idly by I think is just as bad as you know, doing the evil. Like you have to fight, and it's not comfortable, it's not fun, it's not, you know, enjoyable. I mean, at least it shouldn't be. It's a scary thing, and people aren't natural fighters usually. It's very rare to find a natural fighter.
Yeah,
people that naturally have that fighter instinct, where like their first reaction to something that catches them off guard is to fight, and you know they always want to go fight. That's usually a learned behavior. You know?
Yeah, I think most of the people that have that naturally are usually in prison. So
learned behavior.
Well, I'm saying like people who are naturally gifted at fighting don't make it into their adult years because they end up doing something very outlandish and killing someone or something because they're so quick to, that's just their instinct to go to that, and they don't know how to control it yet because they haven't got that developed brain, So
they make those irrational decisions, and
they end up murdering someone, and
I guarantee you that most of those people that are like that and that are in there still learned that behavior. Something happened at a really young age that developed that fight instinct in them.
Yeah.
I think there are people, I think, that have that naturally.
I think there is too, but I think
most of them learn it in one way or another.
Yeah.
So with that being said, you have to learn it. Like this is something that you have to develop. It's something you have to work on. Mentality is so important with this. And I don't want to go down the neurological rabbit hole because I nerd out on it pretty heavily, but we'll save that for a different podcast. But you are so wired for self-preservation naturally as a human.
Yeah.
That it's very hard to intentionally put yourself in harm's way. It has to be a mental shift. It has to be an intentional decision and a press through a lot of very natural instincts that are keeping you from being in harm's way to fight someone, it's that hair, that hair standing up on the back of your head kind of feeling like when something bad's about to happen and all of your instincts are saying like flee, or, or whatever. Or you just hard shut down into freeze because you're so like overloaded with that sensation of like fear and, your body's trying to keep you safe.
Yeah.
So much so that your brain starts like taking in information to try to protect you, which is kind of wild. But so it's something that you have to train. You have to put in effort and focus into not even just learning how to fight. I mean, obviously you need to learn how to fight, whether it's like combative, like hand-to-hand, like unarmed combatives, like, if you're going to do jiu-jitsu or whatever, which I think jiu-jitsu is probably the best all-around thing anyone can learn as far as like martial arts go. Yeah, it kind of gives you
a well-rounded skills within the martial arts. For sure. Like, I've seen small men take on big men.
Yeah.
And beat them
with good technique.
With good technique and good form in jiu-jitsu. So,
so yeah, whether it's actually like, having to get into, or, getting into an engagement with weapons, whether like edged or projectile, like firearms.
Mortars.
So yeah, it's dude.
Samurai swords.
Yep.
No, dude, edge weapons is another ball game. That's takes a different mindset, different type of mindset than I have. But yeah, for sure. I mean, in order to be good at fighting, you have to train. You got to train hard. Whether and you got to train hard in multiple different ways. Hand, firearms. You got to do a lot of different stuff in order to be really effective.
Yeah, fitness is huge. Like you can't be a flop. Like you got to maintain some level of physical fitness where you can, your body isn't going to be a liability. It's going to serve you and be an asset.
Yep. And then going back to the, that fear that you're talking about, I saw this and it was just a good way to put it. It's almost like that feeling never goes away, but a trained person versus a non-trained person, the fear turns into just like anxiety because, if you're not trained, you're afraid going into a fight. Mm-hmm. If you're going into a fight and you are trained, it's almost just like you still have that feeling, but it's more like anxious.
Yeah.
Anxious to get into it. Like any professional UFC fighter, if they don't have that feeling going into a fight, then they're probably going to lose the fight because they're not going into it with the right mindset. Like you're never going to lose that hair standing up feeling where you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Because that just means that
because then you're
complacent. You don't want to live, basically.
Yeah. Well, that's complacency.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't have that like that extra element, to like fuel your skills that you've developed. But
yeah.
So training is so important. But training of the mind as well, like the physical skills that you need to teach yourself, building in doing enough repetition to make it second nature. Which it's usually hundreds and hundreds of reps to log something away as like a learned behavior.
Especially if you've learned it the wrong way first and you're trying to break a bad habit.
Yeah.
It's even more repetitions that you have to do. That's why some of the easiest people to train are the people who've come in with nothing,
Yeah.
Because you're giving their first habit is a good habit.
Right.
So, which makes it really easy.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously on top of, you got to be willing to fight. You got to have the right mindset and the right physically. You got to be physically trained, mentally trained. You also got to have the right gear for it as well. If you, which most of our audience obviously are probably firearms guys, but you got to go out and train. You got to go out and shoot. You got to, move with your group of guys. You got to actually work on movement and, dealing with different things, whether that's, reacting to contact or getting ambushed or assaulting buildings, going through your battle drills, for the basic infantryman skills, kind of going back to that.
Mm-hmm.
You got to coordinate with your guys in order to kind of going back to the coordination, because that's kind of like what is like the blanket for everything in this. But you got to coordinate with your dudes in order to teach them how to fight, or so they can teach you how to fight, depending on, who is kind of leading that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. And, like going back to the mental side of it, I mean, you have it's so important to have these inner monologues with yourself and, really like visualize. I think visualization is a pretty important thing when you're trying to teach yourself or trying to change like a lifestyle or anything like that, and having like good information on it. So actually 2 books I'd recommend is On Combat and On Killing by Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. A lot of people have probably heard of those, but those are really good books at like getting into the psychology behind, and they're older books, so there's like even some newer information that's come out. But I think for a good foundation, a good well-rounded foundation of like trying to get into the mental space of being a fighter and like understanding what levels that can go to and what level it has to go to. I think those are really good books I would highly recommend reading those. I think they're books that everyone should read that are kind of into this stuff. It really breaks down the psychology behind a lot of it. And, a lot of this stuff, the more training you do, the more, I don't want to say automatic because that's definitely not true, but the more training you do, the more, the quicker you're going to be able to force shift into that fight focus. Because ultimately you never know. I mean, you never really know how you're going to mentally react when something like terrible happens, especially when it happens quick, like right in front of you when you weren't necessarily ready for it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the way to counteract that is to try to be as ready as you can. Try to train to the point to where you're as ready as possible for whatever's going to happen, which is impossible to be ready for anything. It is. I mean, you can't. There's no way. You can't read the future. You can't know. But you can train yourself to be as good of a fighter as you possibly can be. And, and also going back to coordination, like maybe that's not your strength. Maybe your strength's more in logistical support or something, but you still need to have, I believe there still needs to be an intentional fight effort put in. Like you need to have some practice you need to practice as a fighter. You need to work towards being more of a fighter.
Yeah. And even if it's not your strong suit, that gives you more fuel to push heavy into it, because it's just like, it's just like athletes, the guys that it comes naturally, sometimes they don't work as hard as the people that it doesn't come naturally to.
Mm-hmm.
So you got your Shaquille O'Neals, people like that, So Shaq, if he would have worked harder in practice, he probably would have been the best basketball player to ever play the game. Like he would have. That's what Kobe Bryant always said that. Like if he would have only worked harder, he would have been one of the best for sure. I mean, he still was one of the best, but it was all natural talent.
Yeah.
That got him there, So definitely, I mean, it's more fuel to the fire to get in there and work hard and become a better fighter.
Yeah. And then, the kind of the next, they almost go hand in hand, but, right after fight, is protect. So, you need to be able to fight, and then you need to be able to also be a protector. And the reason I say they kind of go hand in hand is because if you just have that fighting mentality, like Steven said, a lot of those natural fighters, from his line of work, he's seen that they end up out in prison, and that's unfortunate. And I think a big reason to that is because they don't also have that protector mentality,
No.
And I think it's super important to develop these together, but in a way simultaneously. Like, the more skilled you become at fighting, the better your justification needs to be for defense.
Yep.
That's like, you hear stories all the time of these UFC fighters that are like out there and they get in trouble because they end up getting, there's been a few UFC fighters that have gotten like hot-headed and just beat the crap out of people, and they got in trouble. Like, they got in huge trouble for it. When then you have other situations where guys have shown restraint and, done it out of like 100% self-defense or defensive like others, but then had restraint and not like straight up killed people, because those guys can, a lot of those guys can straight kill people with their hands, So, I think that's a huge part of it, and it's a big part of that mentality. So, like, while you're working on that fighter mentality, you need to be developing like why, the big whys behind why you're, of why you're doing it. You're doing this for the preservation of you and your family and your community, and then with that goes, I think, and this is kind of defense and offense, which defense and offense are two sides of the same coin. Like, you got to have both.
Yep.
You can't have one without the other. So that was why these two are like right beside each other. But
defense wins championships, man.
Yep. And this whole entire focus is, is from a defensive perspective.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen a lot of people in the industry saying like, oh, like, nobody talks about guns anymore in an offensive way. And it's like, I know what they're trying to do with that, because they're trying to shift the focus from like, it's about home defense. There's like a lot of like, and you can thank the NRA for that. The NRA has been terrible about promoting culture when it comes to like, when it comes to all this. But ultimately, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, is a defensive focus.
Yeah.
It's defensive property, nation, community, culture, freedom, family, whatever.
Yeah, it's definitely
it's a defense.
It's definitely reactive, not proactive. Like, you're not going out and like, oh, I see the writing on the wall. They're about to take guns. We're just gonna go storm the Capitol.
We're gonna go straight into Moscow because they talked about they're one day they're gonna be here in Alaska. Like, no, it's come and take it.
Yeah,
it's that we're ready. We're ready to freaking throw down. And when it comes down to it, like, you're gonna see what our offense.
Yeah, you
is.
train to fight, but you need to have that defensive mindset. So that way you're no good if you just all of a sudden go to jail because you made some crazy like prediction. I see this. I see it happening.
Yeah.
The world is coming to an end.
It's like home field advantage. Like, when a football team comes to play football in a home stadium, so when some poor team like the Cowboys comes to Lambeau Field to play the Packers, I'm just kidding. No, but when some team comes to play another team at their home field, that home team has home field advantage. They're still going to get on the field with offense and defense.
Yeah.
But their offense is going to be, the crowd gets really quiet when the offense is on the field, and a good crowd will get really quiet when they're calling their plays. You could almost hear a pin drop. It just sounds like murmuring. and then they get really loud when the play like starts and, make it confusing. And then when the opposing offense is on the team and the home team defense is on the field, the crowd gets super loud, crazy loud, starts like banging and yelling and screaming, makes it hard for that offense to coordinate and do what they need to do. So it's not, don't look at it like, only defense. You definitely still have an offense, but it's from a focus of being more defensive. You have home field advantage, so utilize it. And in your coordination, use your home field. Like, not to jump back into coordination, but that's kind of one thing I wanted to touch on really quick. Like, you need to be coordinating in the environment you live in. Yeah, that's a huge one we forgot to talk about. But so yeah, just really quick tip there. Like, utilize the place you live. Make your area a force multiplier. Like, we live in Alaska. We have snow and cold weather. We're used to it. Like,
I mean, we kind of touched on it because I was talking about road systems within the state, but yeah, we didn't really like directly.
If you live in like the Everglades, dude, you got the swamps, man. Like, get out there with them gators and utilize those swamps. I have no idea what happens in the Everglades, but
send exactly the alligator attack teams that you've coordinated.
Get out on those crazy fan boats, cruise around with those big old bucket hats on, and just smash people. Dude, hillbilly SWIC teams, dude.
Yeah,
just smashing through with their alligator attacks, alligator torpedoes. Anyways, so home field advantage. Have that mentality of being a protector, defender, standing up for what's right, defending the good. If you see someone in need, protect them. I think that's a big part of this Minutemen mentality. Is like, the Minutemen were, the historical Minutemen were ready to deploy within a minute's notice in defense of their community. Yep. It wasn't just like, well, I don't want to end up dead, I'm going to defend myself. No, it was literally like, their mentality was like, you will not come near my family, my farms, my friends,
my town friends. Yeah, like
it's
it's for the people. Like, you're all the people in the community. Yep. So
yeah, and it was again from a defensive. It was a offensive response an offensive response out of a defensive reaction.
Yeah.
So, or I'm sorry, the other way around. Offensive reaction from a defensive response. I don't know, however way you want to say that.
I know what you mean. I know what you're trying to say, and I think so does the.
Anyways, so yeah, I think that those two go hand in hand. I think being able to fight, being able to protect, and then this is another communication is one that we are going to touch on a bunch, like in the future, because with modern communication efforts and capabilities, this is like goes way beyond my knowledge. So we're going to bring people in to help us, but it's immense when you start talking. I was going to say radios, but even just cellular devices. Like, the fact that we have our cell phones here right now, the fact that these are listening to us right now all the time, they're passive listening devices. Communication is, even this, like this podcast, it is a form of communication.
Yep.
So at being able to, jumping back into coordinate communication efforts, and then tying specifically into communication, understanding how you need to communicate, when you need to communicate, and like when not to, because there's times you might not be able to communicate, or if you do, it's going to compromise your position or location or whatever. It's a rabbit hole.
Yeah, and this topic is very like, it's very almost universal, because it's not, you could be just talking about like radio communication, but you also could be talking about, the First Amendment.
Yeah.
So,
or like, hey, you over there.
Yeah.
That's communicating.
Or just coordinating by communicating with each other.
Yeah.
So it kind of is an umbrella statement in a way, because it's kind of like, Yeah, we need to communicate by spreading information through podcasts and social media platforms and all sorts of stuff. But we also need to communicate amongst each other in closed form too, with, whether it be radios or having the skill of knowing how to, when and when not to use radios, or when to just communicate with your voice.
Yeah.
From like a tactical standpoint. So,
or like visual communication, like hand and arm signals.
Yep.
Yeah, like it's huge, and it might sound funny or like self-explanatory that this is one of the core things that we have as far as something to practice and like recognize and be intentional about, but people do. Like, people struggle with communication, like even just in relationships,
Yeah.
Like, communication has to be an intentional thing. You have to practice it. You have to, and the more you do it, the better you get at it, especially from like a tactical perspective or like a more operational, logistical perspective. Like, the more you focus and work on communicating and, tying that into your logistical efforts, the better you get at it, the more natural it becomes. Because, humans have a pretty high intellectual bandwidth for communicating. We can pick up on facial cues. We can pick up on like nonverbal communication, body language, tone. There's a bunch of stuff like that. So but if you choose to not communicate, because sometimes it's easier to just not communicate and just to kind of like look inward and keep stuff to yourself. But you have to put in the effort to work on it and actually like intelligently communicate with each other. And you hear the phrase all the time. It was said to us 1,000 times in the military: shoot, move, communicate. Those are like the three major things that you do as like an infantry unit when you're fighting. You have to be able to shoot, you gotta be able to move, and you gotta be able to communicate. And if you can't do all three of those things, then you're not going to make it. So communication through coordination, communicating while you're fighting, communicating when and where to defend, all these things like tie together. And more specifically, just to kind of narrow in on some stuff, like start getting radios, start working on, it starts with your phones. Like, you can, if you haven't figured out what radios to get yet, you basically carry around a radio with you all the time. Like, your phone is a digital, it's a cellular service radio pretty much.
Yep.
And everyone has them. Everyone has usually a smartphone, at least here, so there's apps you can download that kind of mimic what radios do, so you can kind of practice on that. I would recommend getting something that's end-to-end encrypted. There's different apps that do that. Just do your research and figure that out. But yeah, you can practice. You can start to dial in and kind of get a general understanding of it just using your phone. But I'd recommend doing some research on actual radios and getting some, because not only from like a coordinating like team to team or within the team kind of level, but even just like picking up communication, because listening is a big form of, it's a huge part of communicating.
Yep.
Is passive listening, or being able to listen. And you can listen to anything on a radio, like, as long as you can pick up the signal. Like, as far as what I mean by you can is it's legal too. Like, you're not going to get in trouble for picking up a frequency and listening to it. You can listen to anything's free game. You can also pick up, like, with a little bit of effort, you can pick up where that signal is coming from, and different things like that. So having radios is a massive, in my opinion, is a huge part of communication, and it's a big force multiplier in general. And it ties back into coordination. Like, you can have coordinated efforts for the use of radios and stuff like that.
And then same thing with SOPs, and you got to have that if you're putting a group together and you're using radios and stuff like that. Whether that's when and when not to use them, and then also keeping your radio transmission short. Also figuring out how to program your radios where maybe you want a less range, so you're harder to pick up, or whatever it may be. But and like you said before, there's there's guys out there that we're going to bring on that are way better at this than we are, and hope to do that podcast soon, because it goes into a rabbit hole so deep that I don't even feel like really trying to touch it, because it'll eat up the entire podcast. We'll be here for 5 hours.
Yeah, and we wouldn't have even scratched the surface.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's good because, that much information's available. I mean, radio waves have been, like, I don't even know how to describe this, but the use of radio waves and using them to like communicate and stuff has been a thing forever. Like, I mean, that's something that the technology behind that has been in existence for a long time, and it's only gotten better and better and better, and you have different bands and it gets crazy. But that's a huge part of personal responsibility, is like researching this for yourself, and getting involved, maximizing your communication capability. You have a cell phone, that's great, but just understand that your cell phone is also a listening device. Get a radio, maybe get a radio that's encrypted, maybe get one that's not. There's cheaper radios you can get. You could get receivers that just listen, or you could get like a cheap radio that you mainly just use as a receiver, and then it goes on. And then how do you implement that into your team? Do you want, your team to have the guys you're coordinating with, guys and gals you're coordinating with? Do you want that to have, you want to have the same kind of radios? You want to, kind of go some different directions? There's a lot of things to figure out, but intentionally working on and maximizing your communication effort is such a vital part. Like, you got to have communication. And the more communication, the more inter-team communication you have, the better. Because in a really bad scenario where, you have to stand up and be that modern day minuteman, a lot of the more broad and kind of peacetime forms of communication, I guess you could say, are going to be no longer available. Yeah. So you got to be able to communicate fluidly and effectively with each other and with your local community.
Otherwise, you're already beat at that point.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, without the, kind of circling back, but without the group, without the coordinated effort, you're just one man, or one woman, whatever. But,
yeah.
You're just one person.
Yeah.
And yeah, that might do all right just to, keep you and your family safe. But to actually be, I don't know, depending on what's going on, but to actually be effective, if, you have an invasion or whatever, you need numbers. Like, you have to have numbers. Otherwise, you're going to be hurting.
Yeah. And I get asked a lot, like, well, can my family be my team? I'm like, yeah, for sure. Like, it can, but then make it your team. Like, work with your family. Actually, don't just say like, well, I got my family, we'll be scored away. Like, they need to know, going back to coordination, if your team is your family, then make them your team, coordinate with them, make procedures with them, make sure your spouse understands what's going to happen, and make sure your kids all have jobs. And I think you should start with your family, on some level, but if you can, I think spreading into some other families and, working together. And if you've got families you already hang out with a bunch, then,
why not?
Then yeah, you like kind of start small, start on like, just for more emergency stuff. Like, hey, if there's a big earthquake or something, do we want to try to do this? Do we want to follow these procedures to kind of check up on each other? Start there, and you just kind of add to it. Again, that's kind of going back to coordination, and that's why we talked about that first, because a lot of it comes back to that. I think that's such an important part of the wheel,
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, after communication, we have respond. And, this might sound a little bit broad, but as far as we are concerned, this is a little more focused around like medical response.
Yeah.
But it's also just responding in general. You know, like you can know how to fight, know how to protect, but without that that willingness to respond, you know, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So, but you know, responding with aid is really what we focused on here, and that's like we have little icons for each of these that that we kind of have in a lot of our branding and stuff. And the icon for that is like a medic cross.
Yep.
Because
it kind of is the same as fighting. If you go into a fight without being mentally prepared to fight, you're not going to fight, or you're just going to lose. You know.
Yeah.
The same thing with response. You know, if you're going into a medical trauma emergency, and you don't have if you're not ready to respond, if you're not mentally prepared for what you're doing, you're probably going to end up. That person's either just going to die because you didn't do it right, or you end up injuring them worse, or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to be, mentally prepared to respond.
Yeah. Yeah. And we see it a lot, it's pretty unfortunate. So learning medical skills and learning how to respond would be like that first responder, and pushing into first responder kind of pre-hospital skills. The industry has done a pretty decent job in the last, I'd say, probably 2 years of really seeing it. In the last 2 years, I've seen a shift in the industry where people are starting to accept it a lot more. People are starting to see its value, see its importance, but it's still not viewed as a cool thing to work on.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because I enjoy it so much.
Yeah.
Like I love the medical aspect. Like pretty much and I think the cool side of medical is guys putting, IFAKs and things like that on their kit, whether it's dangler abdomen pouches off their plate carriers or chest rigs, or they got, an IFAK strapped to their belt. But it's like, how many of you have that stuff and you haven't actually like physically used it? Like you haven't
even opened your kit.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Mind blowing, man.
Yeah, and that is such that goes back into coordination. Like you haven't coordinated anything as far, like most people don't coordinate. They throw this stuff on their gear because they see other people doing it and they know it's the right thing to do. They know you should have medical. I'm glad you brought that up because that's really where we are. It used to be like, you'd see battle belt setups with no medical stuff on them.
Yeah.
And then it kind of shifted into like, you'd see like a tourniquet sleeve. Oh. And then all of a sudden it was like, you have to have an IFAK and, tourniquets all over the place. But then you got guys that have never even opened up one of those tourniquets. Like we get people in here all the time that like they bring in their kit. They're like, what do you think? And their tourniquets are still in the wrapper. And we're like, well, first of all, pull that tourniquet out of the wrapper.
And then fold it up where you can actually use it.
What if it's not sterile? It's like, dude, that doesn't matter. Open that thing up.
You're not using it as a dressing.
Yeah. Open that thing up, prep it, and fold out that timestamp band.
Yeah.
Get it out of the way of the windlass. And have that thing ready to where, you're dealing with seconds. If you have to put a tourniquet on, especially for self-aid, and again, dude, we're going to go down a rabbit hole that we'll save for a different podcast, but you're dealing with seconds. In self-aid, the amount of volume of blood you have in your body directly affects your mental capacity. So if you lose too much blood, you are not going to be there mentally to do anything.
Yeah.
Your autonomous neurological stuff's going to be doing its thing for a while, but your ability to process and make intentional decisions will start to fade as you lose blood, and it happens fast. So it's important, and it's another reason why you got to work on this stuff. Like it's got to be.
Yeah, dude. If you're going to train to make holes, you got to be able to fill them holes and make it so your team members stop bleeding, because if you're actually training for, being prepared and stuff, if you think that the fighting side could potentially happen, the medical emergencies within those fights are definitely going to happen as well.
Yeah.
Like we don't just go into like even the most dominant military there is. You're having to patch people up when we went overseas. Like that's just the way it was.
100%.
And we learned that stuff. Every single guy who's, at least like every single person that goes in the military learns it, but every single like combat MOS within the military, like they frequently go through like relearning or get more advanced classes. Like you got EMT and stuff like that in the military because you have to use it.
Yep.
So, and then there's plenty of people, instructors and stuff like that teach this stuff. If you're out of state, there's quite a few, you know, you got your Dark Angel medical classes and
North American Rescue classes.
Yeah, North American Rescue does classes, and there's, you know, you got your different levels. You know, you got some more basic, which if you don't have any skill, obviously go into something like that and then go on from there. Or you got your more advanced for guys that actually already have medical training and stuff like that. And you can find YouTube videos and all sorts of stuff on different classes and kind of figure out which one's best for you. We do one up here, but we only do it in Alaska, so if you are interested, I mean, definitely hit us up because we try to run them frequently. And ours is a little more. The one we currently run is more kind of. I don't want to say basic. I said basic before, but like
it's based around first responders. Yeah, it's everything's covered under the Good Samaritan law here. It's things it's all pre-hospital focus. It's all stuff that keep you or another alive until they get to professional help. That's the focus.
Yep.
But that's combat focus too. You know, that's what we did overseas. Like, keep that dude alive until dust off gets here to take him, you know, to the trauma hospital on whatever fob, you know.
Yeah.
That's it. Or like,
and you can keep someone alive for a long time if you know what you're doing.
100%. Yeah,
so,
you can. Or stable, you know, you can keep them stable. Well, I mean, that's keeping them alive, but exactly. But you can't do it. This is one of the things that you just have to put intentional effort into, because you got to have a little bit of biological knowledge. There's an academic portion to it that you just have to learn. Like, there's basic things that you have to learn. It's not a lot. I think people get intimidated, and it's like,
it's the same thing with fighting. Like, if you're talking about firearms or hand to hand, like there's stuff you have to learn. Otherwise, you can't just go into it and think that, oh, well, just, you know, this is just instinctual. Like, some of it's just not. Like, there's not just, I mean, obviously you want to stop the bleeding, but which I think is pretty instinctual.
Yeah,
to a certain degree,
cover it up with your hands. Put pressure on it.
But there's a lot more into it if you want to actually keep them alive for a long period of time.
Exactly, because not all bleeds can be stopped with direct pressure alone. You know, so and that's just one tiny example. I mean, it's medical, and that's the thing. And we see it a lot here, and it's been a little frustrating because Steve and I are very passionate about the medical side. I have a lot of experience in the military with that, and then beyond after I got out, and Steven does as well. He's pursued a lot of that too. So we probably see it from a biased perspective, but I've also seen in the real world how important it is. And like, I've seen it work.
Just day-to-day life as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Or responding to car accidents.
You realize how important it is just from day-to-day life. Like, you see it. And during peacetime, like, we're not actually even in a war, and you come up on medical emergencies all the time.
Yeah. All the time.
And it's like, you use this more often than anything right now during a peacetime, you know, scenario that we're in right now. So,
like, I guarantee to anyone listening to this, you by far have a higher chance of running into a situation where you need to use medical skills than you would ever using like fighting skills.
Yeah,
I think the chances are far higher. That doesn't mean you won't
ever
have the opposite, but I think that the odds are just stacked way more towards that medical response. But yeah, there's a little bit of a pushback. Like, you know, I've had customers say things like, well, you know, I think I'm saving my money to take, when you guys start scheduling your firearms classes and stuff. And it's like that's awesome. But, you know, I mean, we'd love for you to come take those too, but like, man, like, dude, we're doing these now, and I don't want to say it's more important, because I don't honestly, I think it is. Like, in a weird way, I think it is one of the most important things, because if you can't fight for whatever reason, like, look at Ukraine. Let's go back to Ukraine, since that's something that's going on.
Yeah, going back to that kid that got pulled out. Like, how many people know how to do CPR on an infant? I would say most people listening right now probably don't.
Yeah.
Which is bad.
Yeah.
And that in that video, and that's just one of the such a small scenario of things that are happening over there of an infant getting pulled out of a bombed building and they're having to do CPR on this child.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to do it, then that child doesn't have a chance.
They're done.
They're done. That's it.
Yep. And it's on you for not knowing.
Yep.
It's on you because you should know. Like, this is stuff that we should just know. Honestly, I'm blown away that
they don't
our
teach
school system
Yeah.
doesn't teach at least CPR first aid stuff to people. Like, why? Why not? It makes no sense. And it goes back to that.
Keeping people reliant on the government.
Keeping people reliant.
And,
call 911.
And, you know, that should kind of piss you off as a listener.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of pisses me off because it goes back to the, you know, oh, well, we have police and military, so we'll be all right. Oh, well, we have EMS and EMTs and you know, doctors, and which I appreciate every single one of them.
Yeah.
Military, police, everything, you know, all your medical responding individuals and doctors and surgeons, and, you know, make friends with those people because if the time comes, they're going to be, you know, very useful. But know it for yourself too. I mean, it goes back to, you might not be the best fighter, but you should still be trained to fight.
Yep.
You may not be good with blood. You may get kind of wheezy.
Yeah.
But you know what? You can train through that.
Yeah, you can.
Because I remember when I was a kid, I didn't do good with blood. I remember one time I almost cut my thumb off, and when I was trying to make a bow and arrow as a kid. Just Ted Nugent throwbacks with Caden, but I was trying to make a bow and arrow, and cut my thumb real bad. I was bleeding. My dad helped me get up to the sink and was having me put pressure on it. Well, I was sitting there looking at the blood, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, I'm passed out on the floor. Like,
yep.
And I wake up above the toilet, and like, what is going on? Like, I didn't do good with blood when I was a kid, but I've gotten past that. Like, it doesn't affect me anymore, and that's because you just got to train through it.
Yep.
And get used to it. And then you hear guys like, well, I'm a hunter. Like, I don't get it. Still can happen. Like,
oh yeah, we've seen it.
One of our best friends, Josh, who we had on the podcast, and
he's actually one of our instructors.
Yeah, he doesn't do great with blood, but he's learned to, you know, he's starting to train that through himself. Like, when he sees injuries on humans, it affects him differently. And he's a big time hunter. I mean, he gets a moose, bear, and he does all of it. So, but I mean, you need to train. You need to. I mean, this is obviously, you can tell we're very passionate about this subject, but I think the other stuff is already easy to sell.
Yeah,
so maybe not the radio stuff that easily, but it's kind of starting to pick up momentum, and I think more people are, you know, getting into the radio scene, and same with medical though too.
Yeah,
like I think
medical's further along than radios. I think.
Yeah,
like use of radios. I think it always starts with. I feel like it always starts with gear purchase because that's easy. It's easy to buy stuff. You just need money. You know, it's easy to like research, and it's fun. It's like, ooh, fancy, new, shiny. You know, buying new gear is like it's fun. It's fun to buy something new and put it on your kit, and oh, that looks cool. And you know, people are doing that. I think with radios more than actually learning how to use them.
Yeah,
I think they're like,
and I think it goes back to the
PTTs and all that.
You know, it's like Grand Thumb ends every one of his videos. He's like, "Oh, this gear is cool," and you know, it's
number one rule is looking cool, but
you got to go out and get training.
Yeah.
And it's the same push that we had, you know, we finally started to make the waves in the gun community where guys are going out and getting training, and they're not just having a bunch of guns and they're safe. You know, they're buying, you know, one or two good guns, and they go out and use the rest of the money for ammunition and training on those firearms. Well, it's the same with, you know, it's the same with everything within this industry. That's, you know, firearms, medical, radios, armor, night vision, like everything. If you're going into it, even if you have a good understanding of everything, there's still people that do it better than you.
Yeah.
Like 100%. Like you're never going to be the best.
Yeah, that goes back to like never stop being a student. Like, you know, we talked about that last time, but like it's exactly what you're saying. Like, there's always someone that knows more than you, always someone that can do it better than you. That doesn't mean that you're just like don't keep doing all this stuff, but keep an open mind. Look at what others are doing. Cherry pick what works for you. Learn learn, implement, be intentional about it, practice this stuff. Like these things we're talking about, they're things you constantly have to reinforce.
Yep.
That's the whole point of this is like, these are your responsibility. Reinforce it, work on it, put it to practice. And like going more specific back into medical response, you have to do it. Like this is, and again, swinging back to Ukraine, there's been a massive gap. Like the common people don't know. Like it's way worse than even it is here.
They don't know, and they don't have the medical gear either. That was like a huge hang up. Like North American Rescue, we're a dealer for North American Rescue, if you didn't know. We use their stuff in the military. We know it works.
It's great stuff.
They have been awesome to be a dealer for. Like they have
such a good company too.
They have been amazing to work with, and we're going to try to get in with some other people too that I think are going to be just a joy to work with. So, and I don't mean that sarcastically, even though it kind of sounded sarcastic.
No, it didn't sound sarcastic.
But yeah, so
until you said it, like when you said it, sounded condescending.
I was like, man, that's
they're going to be a joy to work with.
but I'm just saying, like I look forward to. I do truly. I nerd out on the medical stuff. Like I love it. It's fun. Awesome. It's fun. It's kind of unique, and but yeah, I mean, I nerd out on all of it, but
just like jump in, because like everyone that's gone through our class now afterwards, they're like, this was so fun. Like, yeah, and they come in and they start buying a bunch of medical gear and asking a bunch of questions. It's like it opens up the floodgates. They're like, okay, and then they start researching for themselves. We've, when's your more advanced version of the class can be ready? And it's like, well, not quite yet. We're working towards it, but
yep.
So it's like, it's one of those things. It's kind of like any of this stuff. Don't get caught in analysis paralysis. Get in there and just go take a first aid CPR.
Just do it.
Go take a CPR first aid course. Start there.
They're pretty
super simple and very.
See, I've been fortunate that most of the jobs I've worked in my life, I've had to keep that up to date.
Yeah.
And it's made it kind of lame to me, but that's just
because it's become a check the box.
Yeah, it's become a check the box, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, and some instructors treat it that way too, which is unfortunate. So that's another thing with that. You get kind of wishy-washy instructors in that line of work, but
yeah, there's
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Steven and I had an instructor one time. This is kind of what he sounded like when he ran the course. Yeah, it was we're going to get in here, we're going to take care of business, and we're going to get you guys out the door as soon as we can. And it was a rough class. We'll leave it there. But, dude, yeah.
It sounded just like him.
There are instructors that are great, though, and that's a great place to start. First aid CPR, do some research, find a good course, find a good place to start.
Dude, I'm taken down by that. Sounded just like him.
And then, we've had really good instructors too.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely. I mean, and I don't want to, like, if you're a CPR first aid instructor, I don't want to. We are too, as well. Actually,
yeah, we are.
We don't run very many classes, but we need to do some more.
We're scheduling some. It's because we're passionate about so we believe in like the action steps. We believe in like, okay, here's what's happening. Here's what you need to do. First aid and CPR, a little just quick tangent on it. It's so nationally regulated now that there's like a handful of curriculums that are nationally recognized. So in order to get the rating that insurance companies will recognize,
and you to get the certificate,
you have to go through one of these pre-written curriculums. So like when we teach, so we're certified through America Safety and Health Institute. So ASHI is who we're certified through. There's like ASHI, Red Cross, and American Heart Association are like the big three. So we're through ASHI, and they have a pre-designed curriculum that we have to adhere to. Like they send you like all the training materials, and you just have to present it. So that's basically what instructors are doing. So a good instructor will input their own experience and their own knowledge, and like they'll stay up to date on it. But that's where when you have bad instructors, it can go a little bit weird because they just go with whatever, if they became a CPR instructor 15 years ago, then they're teaching that 15-year-old class,
Yeah.
generally. I mean, the curriculum should be updated and they should be just staying up to date on it. But so, we believe in, we've been focusing more on the action steps, which our trauma response training course goes a lot more into, like, if you see this is how you keep this person stable until an ambulance gets there, or until you can get rescue there, or until you can transport them to safety.
Personally move them.
Yeah. So it's a lot more, we still do it's very first aid focused, but it's our own curriculum based on like TCCC and, and also like our own certifications. But then when we teach an actual, like, you're going to get a certificate to be,
we have to teach
certified,
someone else's
then we have to teach the ASHI curriculum. So we do need to start offering it, because not a lot of people in our local area do it. And I know people need it for work and stuff like that. So we're going to start scheduling them, but yeah, just a little background there. But I think it's a good starting point. I think if you don't really know where to start with medical, I think becoming first aid CPR trained, first aid CPR AD, I think is good. And then maybe even BLS, which is very, very similar. That's basic life support. And that's a little more for like medical professionals. Like, that's usually, I think anybody can just take that though. That's usually like, BLS is kind of the CPR first aid version for like medical professionals. But like, you learn how to BVM and stuff like that. So, which we're actually BLS instructors as well. But yeah, those are good starting points. They're cheap. Like, usually you can take one of those classes for right around $100, and it's a certification. You get a 2-year cert, and, so maybe start there and then do some research. There's some great places on the internet, like on YouTube. I sounded like an old, there's great places on the interwebs. No, but like, go on YouTube. There's Prep Medic is fantastic. Skinny Medic's another good one. Actually, check out our YouTube. We've got some really, like, we've put a lot of effort into making some good videos on different things. We're going to add a lot more. We got a lot more plans for that. Yeah, just start getting in it. Maybe start with your IFAC. If you own an IFAC, individual first aid kit, and it's on your belt or your backpack or whatever, open it up, pull everything out of it. Don't be afraid to get in there. If something's sealed in a sterile package, like it's gauze or emergency trauma dressing or a chest seal or something like that, don't open them. But what I mean is, just pull it all out of the actual pouch that everything's in.
So you know where everything's located within
it. Look at what
and
it
then
is.
Also,
yeah,
most of the stuff's got like a little rundown on the back of the packaging or on the front of the packaging of like what it's used for.
Yep. And then something I'd recommend doing is like laying it all out and going from top to bottom. Let's say you've got a cat tourniquet in there, so starting with that and type in on YouTube how to use a tourniquet, how to use a cat tourniquet, and watch a video on it. Boom. Okay, go down to the next thing. Oh, I've got an MPA here. How to use an MPA. Watch a video. Just actually learn what those things do, and don't just buy a kit and slap it on your gear.
Yeah.
You got to know. You got to know what it does. I mean, it's no different than any of this other stuff.
Yeah, it's like putting a handgun on your duty belt and then just never going out and actually using it.
Yeah, or like, I bought these plates, I'm going to stick them in here, and you just got your plate backwards or something. I don't know. It's like, that'd be pretty
That'd
epic.
Be pretty hard to do,
Yeah,
but I've seen crazier things.
Oh yeah, we've seen some crazy stuff. So yeah, it again, I'm sure we sound pretty biased, but
going back to it, I mean, it's the same song and dance. It's get the gear, get training on it, work on it individually, work on it with your group of guys.
Yep.
Because I mean, we when we work with our group of guys, we have a group chat that we kind of talk with everyone with, and we plan out what we're going to work on. We're like, okay, does this weekend work for everyone? And everyone's like, okay, we get an agreement on a weekend. Like, okay, this is when we're going to do this. And me and Jacob mostly, come up with, okay, this is what we want to do. Or we reach out to one of the guys that's good in another area, and it's like, hey, are you willing to do the class this week? And we want to work on this because you're really good. You've been researching it and you know it really well and stuff. So, that kind of goes back to that leadership part where you almost need a guy that's kind of coordinating and keeping things going, keeping it flowing. So
yep, kind of being an admin a little bit.
Yeah. So the next spot or next little topic is navigate.
Yeah.
Which is
huge.
It's huge.
It's massive. It's the biggest thing you'll ever see.
Yeah. So, going back to like if an invasion or whatever may have happened and your cellular data goes down, guess what? You're not going to have your GPS in your phone anymore. So,
yep.
Having some gear to help you in that, and also having the skills. Maybe you need to go do some training on this because there are people.
Everybody needs to go do training on this, even if you've done this before professionally.
Yeah,
this is perishable. This stuff is perishable.
Definitely. So having compasses. If you're going, well, first off, we'll go small. I think having like maps for the areas that you kind of
operate in
and deal with, whether that's, you can have multiple maps to kind of spread out your area, but if you want good maps that work well where you can use like compasses and protractors and actually plot movements and stuff like that, it's going to be pretty tight. Like it's going to be a smaller area unless you just have a huge map that just blows out to the size of like
just folds out forever.
Yeah, which is just insane.
Yeah.
So having a map for where you operate in is important. I think
having a big AO map's important too. Like
area of operations
that you keep in your room or something like that.
In grandma's basement.
I'm just envisioning like my wife being like, why is this huge map? Because in your room, my wife would not be down for that. Like, why is there a map stapled to our wall? Like it's here.
Yeah.
Deal with it. No.
So and you can laminate it, which is what I did in the military all the time. That way you could draw on it and kind of plot different things and this is where we're going.
Which is carried over. That's what we do with our maps now too.
Yeah.
That's the way.
Yeah. So you do that. You get maps for your places of operation, and then where GPSs and things like that are helpful, or when you're making longer movements, maybe moving outside of those areas of operation, you can still. You still almost you would need to coordinate that in advance, kind of in your GPSs. If there's areas that, okay, if this is like a some point that you want to. I don't know,
like an area of interest. You want to go check it out.
An area of interest or whatever. Yeah, you get your coordinates on it, and then you can use your GPS to get to there if you don't have a map in that for that location or whatever. So, I would say try to stay where you have maps because when the GPS dies or whatever, your map's not going to fail you.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and now's the time to get set up for this. So get maps that expand out into larger areas and go way beyond where your actual reach would be, because it's important to know what's out there,
Yeah.
Like if even from like a defensive perspective, like if I was coordinating against me, where out here would I be?
Yeah.
Where would I come from? So it betters your situational awareness and your just overall awareness of the area and stuff like that.
It was kind of like what you were talking about last podcast when you were talking about the Minutemen pre-designated areas.
Yep. Whether
that's areas to defend or areas to attack or areas to kind of bunker
rally
down. Yeah. So same concept. You're gonna pick spots in your community that's like, okay, this is kind of this is an area that we definitely don't want to lose, or this is an area that we don't really want to go in this area, or whatever it may be. Kind of going back to coordinate within your navigation.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's a big part of like controlling an area and defending an area and preventing like access to an area is patrolling, like expanded patrol, regular patrol.
Yep.
That's a surefire way to deny ease of access to like an area, and navigation is a huge part of that. Like setting up designated patrol routes that change, so they're not as easy to, they're not overly repetitive, so you can dial in on like what's going on. You want to be able to set up rally points, all these things that we're talking about. So start getting maps now. Like this is all stuff that you can start buying. And like Steven was kind of going back to what Steven said about what to buy. I really like MGRS. You can do like MGRS and lat long. So if you have both of those, so it's grid coordinates and then latitude and longitude, which will be good to have both. And then topographic. You want to get I really like topographic maps.
Yeah, because that's going to show you like different terrain features and stuff like that, which you need to know because.
Yep. Because that's how you identify what you're looking at. Like if you're looking at a draw or a valley or something, and you're like, oh, okay, well this is that many feet down into that valley. You can look at your map and be like, I'm right here. Like that's how you identify where you are on a map.
Yeah.
So, and it's
without having a GPS where you can get your coordinates directly,
Right.
So definitely using terrain features, especially if you live in a place like Alaska or, somewhere that's got, lots of big terrain features where it's really easy to be like, okay, I got a mountain right over here. Where's that on the map?
Yeah, exactly.
So, and then
like, hey, there's this river
and then
here.
knowing how to do movements as well. Like you can look at it and be like, okay, we're coming up on an LDA or whatever, It's like, okay, we're going to have to
linear danger area.
Yeah. Thank you. We're going to have to probably kind of prepare ourselves to cross this if we're planning on crossing it, or something that can slow down your movement, like a draw. You're probably going to go into a potentially pretty wet area that's going to, and very vegetated, because it's more water means more vegetation. So, just knowing all these little things that will help you move more effectively, and then also it allows you to move in and out of formations. You can kind of brief, okay, yeah, so we're going to be coming up on like kind of an open area here. Let's push out wide, or hey, it's going to be pretty thick. Do like
a bounding overwatch or something.
Yeah. So, maps are used more. What am I trying to say? Maps are used more. What am I saying? I can't put my words to what I'm thinking.
I don't know.
I'm trying to say, it's not just about navigation, I guess. So like navigation is the topic, but like knowing how to use it more than just how to navigate.
Yeah.
I guess. Also know your area too. That's another part of navigation. Like you should know where all your roads are, kind of roughly. Like if you're in a heavily populated area, you should know like this road goes to there, or that road goes to, like for us it's easy because there's not very many roads, but
yeah,
in Alaska. But I'm just saying, like, know where things go.
Yeah, but I mean, even up in Anchorage area, like if you're downtown, it's a big grid system. So understand, that's why in big cities, go north on whatever, or like southbound on this and that. Like that's used a lot more than just like, around here it's like just go down K Beach until you hit the bridge and then take a right, and you're just like, all right, But when you get into cities, it's important to know your actual like direction, either north, south, east, or west.
Yeah.
So practice that. Like put that into practice while you're driving around. Like, okay, I'm going southbound right now, and look around, and just this is information you can just be dialing in on now.
Yeah, and passively kind of figuring out,
Yeah.
Like you can just be on your way to work and work on that, you know what I mean?
It'll put your brain to work too, and it'll turn that complacent, I'm tired going to work drive into like something that can be a little more active and fun, kind of get your brain fired up, ready for the day, so you can be a better slave at work. No, I'm just kidding. But anyways, yeah, so maps, I mean, there's a lot of good places to buy them now. Like I said, I would just really recommend full topographic MGRS, so grid coordinates, and lat long too, I think is a really good way to do it. And like Steven said, get very zoomed in, focused ones, several of like your immediate area, and then get some like bigger ones, and then get some, be strategic, coordinate a little bit, and figure out like what are some areas around me, maybe some other cities or whatever, that I would like to get some more tight perspective, kind of zoomed in maps of, and just start getting maps. You can't have too many, and then categorize them. Like maybe make a filing cabinet that says like, Lower Kenai Peninsula, or whatever it is for the area you live in. But categorize it out, or if you live in a city, like this is from C Street to Airport Heights, or whatever. And yeah, start making your own system, and then going back to coordination, work it in with the group you're working with.
Yep.
Make it a part of what you're doing. Make sure they're doing the same stuff. Have identical maps. So if you're briefing something on a map, they know what you're talking about, because they can pull that map, number your maps, keep them organized. Hey, this is map 2A or whatever. Okay, boom, pull it out. Everyone's got the same map. You have a coordinated, predetermined SOP in place for like referencing maps.
Yeah.
That can also come into play through communication. You can communicate to each other, hey, we're on this map, so pull out this map and pay attention to it. And then knowing how to navigate, like actually knowing how to plot an azimuth, shoot an azimuth, use your compass, and understanding like where you're at geographically.
Base counts. There's a bunch of stuff. So that's why going back to getting training on this is
it's deep.
Very, very important. Like even to the basic level, like start, if you've never done it before, obviously start with more basic level training. You can find YouTube videos and stuff like that of good instructors that teach this stuff. There's quite a few people popping up that I've seen that kind of teach land navigation courses and things like that. We would like to in the future. We haven't started doing that because we don't really have, you almost have to have a good chunk of land in order to work on it properly, I feel like.
We have a chunk of land that's promising, but we're just trying to make sure that, we're going to be allowed to use it.
Yeah.
Because, we have the range and stuff that we're going to have access to this summer. We're excited about that, but it's not near big enough for, and also it's going to be a range.
It's a
So
range.
you can't
so
be out
like,
there stomping around, but no, there's a big chunk of land that we think is a lot of potential. It's got a lot of different topography and stuff in it as well. So so that's something we'll offer, but there's good information for the most part. I think it could be better. And we're going to come out with our own content as well on it, but
there's tons of people that are doing it as well.
Yeah, good info on it.
Just like the medical stuff. I mean, we do it, but there's other people that do it very well. So,
and that's the thing. Don't I don't know. I feel like this industry gets so weird about, oh, well, I'm doing this. So, or I don't know, like get information from as many people as you can. You're going to get so many different perspectives.
Yeah.
And experiences and points of view, and you might learn something really good from this guy over here, and then this other guy that's teaching something similar, you might be like, man, for some reason that just didn't
sit well with me, or whatever, or it didn't, information wasn't picked up as easy, because some people are just better at instructing than others. Like that's just the fact. But you learn that from taking a class with them, and it's like, okay, well, their teaching style didn't work well for me, which is
cherry pick. Cherry pick. It's just like when you go out to a restaurant and you try things on the menu, there's going to be things you don't like.
Yeah.
You're not going to continually buy that. You're going to go back to the stuff that you've bought before that you like.
Unless you're just weird.
So.
And you just really want it to be good.
Like, I will try this until I learn to like it. No, but it's kind of like what I did with corn.
Yeah.
I used to hate corn. I actually like it now, so it worked. It'll work over time, apparently. So just keep going.
Exhibit A, dude.
Yeah. Yep. So ignore everything I just said. No, but seriously, it's basic stuff. But yeah, that navigation, again, this is not a cool thing. This isn't viewed as something that's fun. Like, all right, guys, hey, let's get our gear together. Let's go bust out the maps and the compasses and shoot some azimuths. That's so sick. Yeah, let's go.
I actually hated it in the military.
I know, I did
to be
too.
Completely honest,
you have to do it though.
Yeah,
I hated it too, because a lot of times it was in the snow and you had to get your snowshoes on, which that's a whole other thing. Like getting your step count. Which a step count is how many steps does it take you on average to get to 100 meters?
I've never even thought about that.
Yeah, you got to have a separate step count for snowshoes.
Yep.
So, but then you can do things like that passively. Go get your step count figured out. Do it like 3 or 4, at least 3 times because you want an average. So walk don't walk like a weirdo. Walk at a normal pace have a known distance of 100 meters or yards if you want to use yards for some reason. But if you're MGRS, and meters would be better. It's meters. So
just do it in meters.
Yeah. Walk 100 meters and then walk back 100 meters and then walk back again 100 meters. And each time count how many steps it took you to get there and then get an average. So then when you're actually traveling, and again, this is a separate podcast, so we're starting to get into how to navigate, but basically you keep track of how many steps you've done. So if you know you've got to go 800 meters, well, how many steps does it take you to get to 100 meters? Well, then you multiply that by 8. And so roughly...
I was a Ranger bead guy.
You should be close there.
Everyone that was in the military, I always had Ranger beads, dude.
Oh, yeah, Ranger beads, dude. That's a way to do it. To keep track of every 100 meters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you just slide one down or up, however you have it made, but...
Cue the guy straight out of Fort Benning. I thought that was to keep track of water. You
What?
remember that?
Was that?
Yeah, wasn't it like you used it for like hydration or something?
I did not do that.
I don't know. I think my unit did. I don't remember, but that was so long ago. Like how much water you've drank in a day or something weird.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think. We had to keep them on our Camelback.
Oh, maybe we did too. I don't remember now, though.
But yeah, for navigation, they work great. It's literally like you got little beads on a 550 cord little thing, and you slide them, up or down to count how many,
I used them. It helped me.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm just bad at like keeping track.
No, I used them
because there
too.
was 100% times where I would be like, dude, I don't know where I'm at, and that
Yeah.
thing was just a saving grace for me. Like,
Yep.
dude, there we go.
And don't be afraid to stop, pull out your map, kind of reorient yourself. There's a bunch of stuff. You got to understand how to pick a landmark so you
Yep.
can stay on a straight path.
Because you start, depending on what your dominant side is, you'll just start pushing one way or the other. So
Once you start bushwhacking through a bunch of crap, before you know it, you're just way off.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Anyways. That's the double time. Anyways. So Survive. Survive is our next one on the list. Which this is a huge topic. That's just, I mean, all these topics are huge. Like, we need to have individual podcasts on each one.
They will in the future.
And maybe even like part 1, part 2, potentially part 3.
Communication, radio stuff's going to be a 82-part series.
Yeah, we might just keep coming back to it, giving more information. But Survive, and this is everything from fieldcraft, just knowing how to live in the woods, and
basic stuff that people don't know anymore.
It's fieldcraft to gardening, knowing how to get
agriculture.
Food,
yep,
whether it's meat or vegetables, or this one is by far probably got the most skills wrapped up in one little word by just surviving, because there's a lot going into it. You got to know how to get water. You got to know how to get food. You got to know how to build shelter, and
it also
survive.
encompasses the rest of the things.
Yeah.
Survival might require coordination. Survival requires medical knowledge. Survival requires
they kind of all feed each other in a way.
They do.
So
yeah,
and that's why we selected the ones that we have.
Mm-hmm.
If you go on our Instagram, you'll see every topic we cover in this on, like, I don't know what that's called, but it's like permanent
highlights.
Stories. Oh, highlights.
Yeah, story highlights.
So Jacob's built like an icon in every single one, and we'll add to them as we have content to put in there. But and then same thing with our challenge coin that's on the back of our challenge coin. So, which is cool.
Which the challenge coin's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because we've had these icons for Instagram is so like it. I don't want to get into that. That's the only thing. Instagram's hard to
do what we want to do.
Well, we're so restricted on there that it's hard to navigate that, and so it took a long time to, and everything has to be so good nowadays because the standard's so high, which is awesome.
Which our standard's high as well.
Oh yeah, but that's what I mean. That's why it takes longer to get content on Instagram, because we have a ton of content that we're working on constantly to go on there, but not all of it makes the cut. and usually it's photo related. Like we go out and do. So we have really limited time. I mean, we got like we're holster building and slings and soft goods, and obviously running the store. We're open
Retail.
from time to time, or from this time to this time.
That's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
We're open time to time.
No, but we're open, for a big portion of the day. So for those of you that are local, kind of know that it's thankfully that time's past us. We went through a weird growing period of like trying to get a lot of it's our personal lives,
We both have families and
Yep, and kids and
we're doing this as the side job there for I still am, but
yeah,
you are now full time, so.
Yep, and we're trying to survive through that Biden winter of death and sickness that he said would be upon us all, which I feel like we all have been sick somehow, but
no death from the DDS team
thankfully.
yet.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, all right.
But anyways,
so survive.
Yeah, so I mean, you got to survive through that winter of death and sickness, and there's so much in here, and it's so much that has been. I feel
so
like
much
it's
gear too, dude.
Yeah,
you got to know, like,
especially for where we live. If you live somewhere that's extreme, like either super hot
or
super cold. Oh, we're having an earthquake.
No, I'm shaking like crazy, dude.
Are you sure?
We might be having an earthquake.
We are. Yeah, there's a little earthquake going on.
So we have earthquakes a lot here in Alaska. if you're not local, but anyways, I totally got derailed. Anyways, there's a lot of gear. Like in order to stay warm during the wintertime, if you're not indoors,
it's still rolling.
You gotta figure it out. And then also, like, if you are planning on being indoors, you gotta have generators and everything to keep things going.
Yeah, gotta stay
it's
warm.
Like John Lovell said, everyone's talking about bugging out. I'm talking about bugging in.
Yeah,
and it's smart, but at a certain point, it's gonna be tough because your fuel and stuff like that, it's gonna eventually kind of diminish to the point that you don't have that stuff. So,
yep.
And that goes back to coordination, like kind of making plans for that sort of stuff.
Survival is so, I think it dips back into the old way things were done so much, like building and maintaining fires,
Hunting.
prepping for that, trapping, hunting,
gardening.
Yep. Agricultural skills, like things that, in a first world society, you don't have to do anymore. You get natural gas, you got electricity, you don't have to make power at all. You just turn on your heat or air conditioning or whatever, and there you go.
Yep.
You go to the store, buy pre-made food if you want. Like you don't even really have to cook anymore.
No.
So that's another thing, cooking, like understanding how to cook. It sounds so simple, but so many people don't know. Like so many people are like, "Oh, I can make macaroni and cheese." It's like, no, you need to know what are healthy temperatures to cook meats to. Different ways to season food that is not only going to make it more enjoyable, but also give you more nutrients and give you more more bang for your buck, so to speak.
Yeah, if you're not very good in this area, I highly suggest, and this just sounds so random, but I highly suggest watching Meat Eater on Netflix.
That's a really good suggestion.
Because not only does he show you different tips and tricks on how to hunt different areas and hunt different animals in different areas, but he also shows you how to prepare, like doing different types of cooking with them.
Yeah, wild game stuff.
Which,
huge.
Talk about a motivator, dude.
Yeah.
Is having some good food. I can't get motivated off of much else, but
don't even get me started, dude.
Well, I know you.
We might have to do a podcast on like cooking skills. I know that sounds ridiculous, but we can break down.
Some of our podcast listeners might be like,
they're
yes.
Like, some of them are like, I'm out of here. I'm gonna go eat my macaroni. It's like I was talking to Reggie the other day, Andrew, guy we mentioned earlier. He was like,
I got top ramen.
I'm gonna be up there for my birthday. He's like, we're gonna do a birthday meal. I was like, yeah, dude, what do you want? Because like for those that don't know, I'm really into cooking. Like that's like my hobby. I cook a lot of food and I like to make like really good food. And I was like, oh yeah, dude, let's make something. Like, you want to throw something on the smoker? Like, what do you want to do? Should we just straight up just sear up some like beautiful ribeye steaks? Like, what are we thinking? He's like, I want tuna casserole. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, and I want your wife to make it the way that she used to make it when we all were living up there. So just like macaroni, like in the microwave, and throwing tuna and peas and cheese. And I laughed so hard. I was like, dude, you were such a simpleton with your taste buds. He's like, that's what I want. And I was like, fair enough, dude. We'll have it. So it's just funny. But anyways, yeah, that's survival is so important. And it's so overlooked. And a lot of it, I think a lot of it, because it sounds so basic on the surface.
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, I got to survive. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you might have to make a fire. People don't start to really think about it from like, if I had no, grid support of any kind, I had no support from the electrical grid, the gas system, I mean, it goes on and on. If you didn't have that infrastructure that we currently have in a first world society, you start thinking about what all you have to do, and it's immense. It's immense, especially when you have a family and you got multiple mouths to feed and stuff like that. But staying dry, keeping clean, like good hygiene, like these are things that are a huge part of survival as well.
Yeah,
like
because you can just die from that alone. That's another thing that people don't understand in Ukraine as well, is like the amount of people that are just dying from not having water.
Yeah.
Because they're stuck in buildings because of all the bombings. Every time that Russia says, okay, yeah, you guys we'll allow, the women and children to leave, they open up like a certain time block, like, okay, get them out of the city. They start to move. Well, as soon as that happens, they start dropping bombs on the people again. And people can't get out, and they're stuck in these buildings, and there's people just dying of thirst over there because they don't have water. Which there's not much they can do about it. Those people there probably actually could get water if they were put in a position where they could get it,
Yeah.
But long story short, I'm just saying, like, knowing how to, take care of yourself in times where, you can die very easily if you don't take care of yourself.
Yeah.
That's
100%. And I mean, hydration is like that's probably the most important thing you got to focus on. Like,
yeah, hydration does so much for you everywhere,
Oh yeah.
Well, it does good for
you've got a matter
heat
of days,
and
right?
cold,
Right.
You have to be hydrated.
Yeah.
It helps you with blood loss as well. You gotta stay hydrated, otherwise
you can't clot. Your body won't clot, and take care of yourself. And yeah, but what I was saying though is like, with water, you need water. Like, you'll die without water in a matter of days, whereas you can go without food for
a while.
Several days to weeks, really.
Yeah.
With very, very little food, little to no food.
Depending on your reserves that you have on your body, Me and you would last a little longer than some
got
folk.
a little bit of fat for our bodies to eat away at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to be too skinny, long story short.
So,
I mean, being fit is good, but
oh yeah, got to be fit. I'm not nearly as fit as I should be.
No, I'm not either.
That's my biggest weakness, is my physical fitness. We've both been working on it though. It's something that we've tapered down on a lot. We were fat bodying around pretty hard there for a little bit, but it's tough too in the winter. It's hard to stay. I think up here it's hard to stay fit in the winter. Your body naturally like puts on weight too because it's cold. It's something that your body naturally does. And it's just dark, and it's hard to be, without those extra vitamins, vitamin D and stuff. It can be hard to get out there.
Take your vitamins.
And smash around. I know. I've thought about taking more vitamins, but anyways. So yeah, survival, and then rounding it out, kind of the final thing. And it might sound random compared to everything else, but I really want to really drive this home, because I think for us, it's such a vital part of all this. It's faith and freedom. So the reason these are kind of together, and our icon for it on our little pictures, our little picture icon for it is a cross. And, that might not apply to everyone, but Stephen and I are Christians. And that's something that we're very passionate about. We're very, passionate about our faith and our walk with the Lord and stuff, and it's something we're always trying to work towards. And again, that might not apply to everyone, but the reason that faith is tied with freedom is because one of the main reasons this country was founded was on the pursuit of religious freedom.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's why people came here. That's why that's a huge reason why the colonies were established, was to be able to not have to be under some certain religion, to have the freedom to worship as you see fit as an individual. And, but more importantly, faith. And, even if you're not a quote unquote religious person, I think it's important to have faith in something bigger than yourself, and to have some kind of a structure that you believe in that gives you a sense of morality. I think that is so important, because if you don't have a sense of morality and something to give you an anchoring in true right and true wrong, then you're going to get caught in between good and evil pretty quickly.
Yeah.
You're going to become a in a really bad situation. Like, let's just use this as an example. If there was a supply chain disruption, let's say Alaska got completely cut off and it was every man for himself, law and order was gone, it was all lawlessness, and before you know it, you're going to have warlords and criminal like activities and bullies and like, unfortunately, like raping and pillaging going on in mass. And I believe you're going to have people that you're going to have wolves in sheep's clothing. You're going to have people that are like, oh yeah, we're here to protect you. And like a good example, it's a Hollywood example, but is The Walking Dead. If you ever watched that series, you have like your factions. They'll like come into like an area and like, I've only watched like 2 seasons of it, but you'll have like groups of people that
it happens all the way through that.
Yeah,
whole
they're
TV
like,
show.
Yo, yeah, come in here and we'll take care of you, and then they like enslave you, and it's like, or they'll just come and attack your people, and you have this constant fight between, and the actual issue of why this all happened starts to get overshadowed by the conflict between everyday people.
Yep.
Like the zombies becomes a second thought in that show. It's like, oh yeah, there's zombies, but it's like, because the conflict is so immense between like
just normal people,
people trying to be good and survive and trying to do the right thing, and people that are
taking advantage,
terrible, and that's just gonna happen.
It's 100% gonna happen,
and it's gonna happen to you if you don't have some kind of structured sense of morality.
Yep.
That's just the way it is. I've seen it too much in the real world to not believe it.
And also it's gonna happen to you if you didn't do any preparation prior, because ultimately everyone became, I don't remember who we were talking to, but it's like when your kids are starving, you're going to be willing to do some pretty evil things probably.
Oh, yeah.
Because
yep,
you're going to try to take care of your kids. And if you are prepared prior to that, then you should be set up for success.
Yeah.
And it won't have to come to that, I guess.
Yeah. Exactly. And if your whole focus for all of this stuff is coming from a more selfish perspective, and that's again why coordination I think is so important, like thinking about the community, thinking about a communal effort instead of just like so hyper focused on just what you want. Yes, it's your personal responsibility to get all this going and to do it. Like you have to ultimately take action, but trying to make it bigger than you, is super important, and it gives you that thing worth living for, and that thing worth fighting for, and that bigger than you sense is powerful. It's a drive that humans can push to pretty heavily, so whatever that is for you, but for us it's faith in Jesus, so it's different for everyone, and we've been pretty open about that since the beginning. So, and I'm not saying that necessarily that,
Yeah, and going back to even before, like, we're just in the worst conditions. Like, if you're talking about just in our current times, faith and freedom is very important. I mean, I always go back to this John Adams quote: "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." And basically, what he was saying is, without some sort of moral backing, our Constitution will fail, and like our country will fail, actually, because it's founded like it. You need to have some sort of moral compass in order for all our rights, that we have within our Constitution to actually not be taken advantage of and end up ruining our country. Which we've seen that. We're seeing where people try to spin the Constitution in ways that it's like, well, no, but you got to have some sort of moral compass, otherwise you're wrong. You are, like, you're just gonna end up ruining what good thing we had. It has happened. So
yeah, and it happens more and more, and I think the longer societies exist, the easier it is for them to be degraded because of those reasons.
Yeah.
With bountiful resources and money and like wealth and peace, where there's not a bunch of stuff you have to focus on, all these like sinful, selfish, pleasurable based desires start to like overcome everything else. And, that selfish intent overpowers that faith in something bigger, that structured morality, that you have, and it starts to just forget everything else. So you got to maintain it. It's got to be a part of it. And in my opinion, it's all encompassing. Like, without that, all the other stuff's just going to shatter. Kind of like what you're saying about the rights.
Yep.
So yeah. But that's pretty much everything. I mean, we just wanted to, what?
That's all you got to do.
Yeah. No. I meant as far as like our core beliefs is like what you should work on.
Yeah, and what makes a Minuteman or a Minuteman.
The modern day Minuteman.
Yeah. Yep. So it without those things, without those key focus points, and then breaking down each point, and which, like Jacob said before, we're going to get into a podcast about them more individually, and maybe multiple podcasts about them individually. But they are like, you have to work at it. Like, it's not going to be just something that just comes easy. Like, you're going to have to just plunge in, and some of it might just be overwhelming, but just kind of get your feet wet and just kind of, all right, well, the water's not that cold. I'm going to jump right in, because that's ultimately the only way to get started. It's just to kind of go in.
Yeah. Just get out of that analysis paralysis and just start acting. So yeah, just to kind of summarize, coordination, being able to fight, training to become a fighter, having the willingness to protect and defend, and having that mentality of defense, protection, communication, responding with in general and with medical aid, being able to navigate your area and your surroundings and knowing where you are, being able to survive in general, fieldcraft and sustaining for long periods of time with just what you have, and then faith and freedom, maintaining that morality structure, and to in turn, maintain that freedom. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a lot of stuff, and it's, again, we this is just, when we do these things, we just sit down and start talking. There's not a lot of structure to it. We just wanted to have a good conversation, and we're thankful for those of you that were in the conversation with us. Definitely reach out to us if you want. I would love to hear from you. And also, like, what's your perspective? Like, what do you guys think about, this stuff? I mean, what are things that you're working on currently?
or maybe areas even that you guys may want us to talk about, like stuff that, I have a question here, you guys should do a podcast on this because I can't find anything on it or whatever. And we don't know everything, but I mean, we'll do our best, or we'll at least reach out to you and be like, try to give you a source where you can find information, we are definitely trying to be as open with information as we can be, and then still run a company on top of it. So we have, most of our social media platforms and our, podcasts, things like that. We are just trying to get as much information out there to, other people.
Yeah. And also you'll see us share other people's stuff a lot, like on our story. And that's because we fully agree with it. There's a lot of other people, like some companies get tunnel visioned on like marketing for like, we're going to do this and we're going to keep everything like in house, you know what I mean? But for us, I think it's more about getting the info out there. Like if there's been several posts we've come across. It's like, hey, this is how you set up a tarp tent, or like, this is what I have in my sustainment ruck for living in the southeast, or, whatever.
Yeah.
And if
we don't live in the southeast, we'll post it up anyways though. But because there's a chance that someone that's following us or someone that listens to us lives there. And it's like, I want to give everyone as much information as I can. Like,
and if somebody gets a good write-up, they deserve the spread.
Exactly.
If someone's giving out good content, good information, and you see it on our story, go follow that person. Go give them love. Click on that post, read what it is. This is the perfect time to start gathering information.
Because it's readily available.
Yeah. Train yourself. Now's the time. It's not when the Russians have entered your country and are bombing your cities and not letting you get water.
Yeah.
It's before that. It's now when there's no view of anything potentially going to happen necessarily. But things are starting to get testy, and that's a big reason too why, we've been working towards this since 2015, 2016. We've been working towards this vision that we've had since the very beginning. But the reason 2021 is when we decided, all right, let's start working on our marketing. Let's start shifting our, let's start working on some branding. That's stuff that you got to do. Like you got to play the business game a little bit.
You do. And then you also have to play the game of acceptance, because unfortunately, if we went, headlong into this stuff back then, we would have fell flat on our faces. Like, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
It for one, wouldn't be as accepted, and for two, we didn't have the gear to do it in the manner that we wanted to do it in. So, we're very picky. We need to have good content. Otherwise, it's just not going to get listened to anyways, or not going to get seen.
Well, yeah, and it's not even about that. It's more about like, why even offer it if there's people out there doing it better than sorry,
I had a little
Steven made a crazy noise and threw his hands up and did a dance, and I was confused. No.
My recording started doing something weird, so I was just like, I thought we lost it there for a second, but anyways.
Okay, good. If you can't offer anything that doesn't have value compared to what other people are doing, then I don't view much value in doing it. You know what I mean? So like, we wanted to get our stuff to the level to where it's like, we think it's going to be worthwhile. We think it's going to be worth people's time, worth our time to put out, and worth people's time to consume and share around. And, and we want it to be good info. We don't want to just sit back and, be like, hey, we have all this info, and then,
not actually deliver,
and then, or deliver info that like isn't actually helping, it's hindering,
Yeah.
So that was a big part of it too. But we really kind of jumped into this year. We wanted this year to be a good start point because of where we're headed, because of what things are looking at. It was almost out of necessity. It was like, all right, now's the time to jump into this.
Yeah, because it's needed.
It's needed. And the more the merrier. And I'm glad to see, other people doing it. The Alaska community specifically is usually like pretty far behind. And that goes for us too. Like we struggle to stay up to speed. I don't know what it is, but it's like Alaska's, we've talked about this before, but it seems like in everything, not just this industry,
music, everything.
Yeah, trends. Alaska's like 3 to 4 years behind, it seems like. So, and yeah, and it exists in the gun industry as well. Like we're seeing it, like we've noticed a trend in people starting to go to like appendix carry inside the waistband holsters more.
Yeah.
And it's like just now, like this year, it's like people are like, oh, I've really been being told that I need to carry inside the waistband, you know? And it's like, I mean, that's been like a standard carry position, you know, one of the most effective and efficient carry positions now for the last several years.
Yep.
So that's just one example, and it's fine. It's just, we live in a very, Alaska is a very unique area. We're very isolated, independent, you know, it's a very figure it out for yourself area, you know?
Yeah.
People, it's like the pioneer mentality. Like you're just up here grinding away in the crazy environment, and that's just kind of the way it is. So, but with that, you know, that's why we were like, all right, we need to do what we can, you know, and teach what we know. You know, there's stuff we know, and there's things we're trying to learn still. And, you know, we're planning on putting on the student caps and learning where we can, and then bringing that info back. And yeah, it's good stuff. I'm excited. I'm super excited about it.
Yeah. And this is us just kind of just getting your toes wet on all of it, you know, like what I said earlier. I mean, this is us just trying to, you know, get your toes wet and kind of start experiencing it for yourself. And we'll talk about this more next time, I guess, or not next time, but we'll talk about this more as time goes on. Like we just go into the same topic. Yeah, I'm excited for the next podcast we got.
Yeah, and we're gonna try to launch these every week. So that was something that we really failed the last time. Was like our podcast was like it was. I think we did okay at like every other week for a little bit, but then it became like once a month, and then it kind of became like, oh, one would drop randomly, and you know, and we were working with what we had, but I think it's important to keep the information flowing, keep things going, keep the communication up, you know, both ways. Like we want to hear from you guys. We want to get info out. We want to hear other people. There's a lot of other great podcasts going on, and other just avenues of information going on. It's so awesome to see, like you have such an influx of these guys coming out of the military that have really started to learn. It's not just military guys either, but obviously, I mean, look at like companies like T-Rex, you know, those are civilian dudes that are just pioneering.
They've been working hard to learn. You know, they've been great students and continue to be students, and
yeah,
that's what keeps them relevant. You know, and keeps them giving good information is because they're never too prideful to keep learning.
Yep.
And I think that's the way you need to be.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of these military guys that have exited service, you know, and they're bringing what they've learned and their experiences into the common world, you know, and to the common man. They're bringing it to the citizens, and they're saying like, here are things you can do, you know, and it's awesome. It's great. We're in a really cool, the industry as a whole has shifted into a pretty awesome place. So take advantage of it, dip into it, you know, get your toes wet, get your feet wet, get all the way in at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited this is fun for us to do, and we get amped up about it, and I'm excited to start like piercing into these things specifically. But yeah, man.
Yeah, man. It was good sitting down with you. We'll do it again soon.